හරිම සුමුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Tuesday, the 23rd of January 2024. Inflation to accelerate. Central Bank forecasts Sri Lanka's inflation to reach 7% in the short term, expects market interest rates to come down. Online safety. Parliament heats up as the controversial online safety bill is presented for its second reading. Severe repression. United Nations urges Sri Lanka to immediately suspend the heavy security-driven approach in Operation Yuktiya.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a warm welcome to this evening's edition of AdaDerana's English News First at 9. You're with Jonathan Benedict. Let's take a look at our top stories for the evening right now. Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe says that Sri Lanka's inflation rate will see a spike following the value-added tax that took effect from the 1st of January 2024. According to Governor Veerasinghe, the inflation will swell close to 7% in the short run during the year, and added that it will adjust back to the expected target of between 4 to 6% in the medium term. Keeping policy rates stable, the regulator said that there is more room for market rates to further adjust downwards in the coming days. The Monetary Policy Board of the Central Bank decided to maintain the standing deposit facility rate and the standing lending facility rate at their current levels of 9% and 10% respectively. The board took note of the effects of the recent developments in taxation and supply-side factors that are likely to pose upside pressures on inflation in the near term. However, it noted that the impact of these developments would not materially change the medium-term inflation outlook.
අපේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති පොළ අනුපාතය බේසිස් පොයින්ට්ස් එකකින් අඩු කරනකොට යම්කිසි ආකාරයක කෙටි කාලයකදී නැවතවරක් මේ මට්ටමේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති පොළ අනුපාතය තියන් ඉන්නවා කියලා හේතුව වෙළඳපොළ පොළ අනුපාතවලට තව දුරටත් ප්‍රතිපත්ති පොළ අනුපාතයේ මට්ටමට සාපේක්ෂව ළඟා වීමට තව අවකාශ තිබෙන නිසා සංචිත ප්‍රමාණය සෑහෙන වර්ධනයක් තියෙනවා. ඒකම විදේශ විනිමය අනුපාතයේ ස්ථාවරත්වයකට පේන තියෙනවා. ඒකට ඒත් එක්කම පොළි අනුපාතය තව අඩු වෙලා රට තුළට තවත් විශේෂයෙන් පුද්ගලිකාංශය ලබා ගැනීම හැකියාව වැඩි වීම තුලින් අපි හිතනවා ආර්ථිකයේ නැවතත් යථා තත්ත්වයට recovery ඒ process එක දිගටම යයි කියලා බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා.
Governor, you earlier said that at the end of January inflation might be at about 5%, but you just said now that it might be closer to 7%. Is there any reason for that?
Before this VAT change was kind of considered, then we had this inflation forecast around 5%, even from January onwards. But once we got to know this VAT is going to be introduced and when there was some certainty in the implementation, then we have revised our predictions upward to reflect this impact of VAT.
Thank you. And when do you think inflation might spike?
Uptick in inflation in January, because once the price levels gone up, it will remain at that level, and impact on inflation will remain for at least 12 months period. Because once it's increased and remain at that level unless some of the factors will bring it down. First couple of months, there will be some increase. Close to just above in the middle part is about 6%. I think maybe probably month of January, February, that will remain, and then after that it will gradually remain around high levels for some time, and then it will come down back to 5% on the medium.
How satisfied are you in the reduction in the interest rates, overall interest rates in the market?
It has been lower than what we anticipated when we issued this order somewhere back August, but by that time some banks had already started the process of bringing down interest rates. But other banks, those are not started the process. We asked them to bring down at least I think 350 basis points by in December. A lot of banks have done, but there are some banks they have reduced, but not to the extent that we expect.
සංචිතය බිලියන 4.4 මට්ටමක පවතිනවා කියලා සඳහන් වෙනවා. මේකෙන් භාවිතයට ගත හැකි ප්‍රමාණය කොච්චරක්ද? ඒත් එක්කම චීන විනිමය හුවමාරු පහසුකමෙන් ලැබුණු ප්‍රමාණය මේ වෙනකොට භාවිතයට ගත හැකි මට්ටමක තියෙන්නේ.
තවම ඒක තියෙන්නේ මම හිතන්නේ බිලියන 1.4ක් විතර වගේ ප්‍රමාණය තමයි 4.4න් තියෙන්නේ PBOC ස්වප් එක. ඒක දැනට තියෙන තවමත් ඒක පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් මට්ටමේ අපි ඇත්තටම මේක ගැන සාකච්ඡා කරන පටන් අරගෙනත් නැහැ. ඉතින් අපි බලන්න ඕන තව ටිකක් වැඩුණාට පස්සේ ගැන සාකච්ඡා කරන්න පුළුවන් ඉදිරියේ. දැනට මම හිතන්නේ අපේ සංචිත දැනට යම්කිසි බෆර් එකක් තියෙනවනේ. ඒතකොට තියෙනකොට ඒක පාවිච්චි කරන්නම අවශ්‍යයි කියලා නේද? ඒක ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම අරමුණ ඒකේ චීන සහ ලංකාව අතර තියෙන වෙළඳ යුවන් වලින් කරනකොට තියෙන පාසුකමනේ. එතකොට ඇත්තටම චීනට අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා නම් මේක තව දුරටත් එන්කරේජ් කරන්න. එතකොට ඒගොල්ලන්ට පුළුවන් මේක පාවිච්චි කරන්න කියලා එකඟතාවයට එන්න. අපේ සංචිත තියෙන ප්‍රමාණයක් තියෙනවා. අපිට සංචිත බිල්ඩ් අප් කරන්න යම්කිසි ටාගට් එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒකත් පහසුවෙන් කරගෙන යනවා. ඒක නිසා
Governor, can we have an update on the debt negotiations?
on the official creditors, we are now trying to finalize the MOUs. The commercial creditors, we are making progress and exchanging proposals and having discussions through our advisors and their advisors.
This IMF has called for recapitalization of the central bank.
If you look at the IMF statement, what they say, if there's a need to recapitalize central bank in 2025, that may be required if our balance sheet or the net worth is going to be negative after the impact of this rate reduction. When you look at end of December balance sheet, well, we still maintain a positive equity. So I don't think there's a need for us to seek recapitalization at this point. Going forward, what we expect with the reserve build-up and multiple operations, we should be able to build up more of our equity and reserves.
අය සාමාන්‍ය විදියට ඒ කියන්නේ පෙර පරිදි ගෙවාගෙන යාමේ හැකියාව ඇති වෙන්න අපේක්ෂා කරන්න පුළුවන් කොයි කාලෙ විතරද?
එකඟත්වයට එනවා අපි අලුතෙන් ඒ තියෙන අය ටික කොච්චර කාලයක් තුලද ඉදිරියේදී යම්කිසි පොලි අඩු කරලා එහෙම නැත්නම් හැකට්ටක් ගන්න හැකට්ටක් අරගෙන එහෙම නැත්නම් අය දීර්ඝ කරලා ගෙවන එක දීපාසිකත් එක්ක කරන්න එකනේ. දැන් ගිවිසුම් අසං කරාම අසංකර දවසේ ඉඳලා ආයි අපි අඩු මට්ටමකට ගෙවාගෙන යනවා. කොමර්ෂල් අයගේ ඉස්ලාම් ඇග්‍රීමන්ට් ඉන් ප්‍රින්සිපල් ගන්න. එතෙන්දි වෙන්නේ අර තියෙන පරණ බොන්ඩ්ස් එක අරගෙන අලුතෙන් ඒ බොන්ඩ් එක්ස්චේන්ජ් එක කරන්න ඕන. මම හිතන්නේ ඇතර දික් කාලයක් යන වැඩක් කියලා ඒක. එකඟත්වය තමයි වැදගත්.
The date for the Supreme Court to consider petitions alleging violations of members' rights in the Employees Provident Fund and the Employees Trust Fund due to the government's domestic debt restructuring program has been established. Following a decision taken today by a 3-member judge bench of the Supreme Court, FR petitions are due to be taken up for consideration on the 30th of October 2024. Appearing on behalf of the Attorney General, Additional Solicitor General Viraj Dayaratna notified the court that preliminary objections would be made for the dismissal of pertinent petitions without a hearing. The FR petitions were put forward by 4 persons, including the General Secretary of the Free Trade Zones and General Services Employees Union, Anton Marcus. In other news, opposing a decision by the Ministry of Health to temporarily suspend the DAT allowance allocated to state-employed doctors, the Government Medical Officers Association and the Government Dental Surgeons Association today decided to launch an indefinite island-wide strike commencing from 8 a.m. tomorrow. Issuing a statement in this regard, Director General of Health Services, Dr. Asela Gunawardana, stated that the DAT allowance allocated to government doctors will be temporarily halted due to insufficient funds in the Treasury. However, a short while ago, the threatened strike, which was slated to be launched tomorrow, was called off by the GMOA following a notice that the payment of the DAT allowance would resume as planned earlier. The Government Medical Officers Association, along with the Government Dental Surgeons Association today, announced the launch of an island-wide strike commencing from 8 a.m. tomorrow. This decision as such by the health sector trade unions were reached as a result of the circular issued on the temporary suspension of the DAT allowance allocated to state-employed doctors.
දැනටමත් සමහර ආයතනවල විශේෂයෙන්ම ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදා රෝහල් ආශ්‍රිතව සේවය කරන සියලුම වෛද්‍යවරුන්ට මේක ගෙවලා ඉවරයි. ඒ අයට 20 වෙනිදා වෙනකොට වැටිලා ඒ දීමනාව 35 ඉඳන් 70 දක්වා කොටසකට මේක ගෙවලා ඉවරයි. එතකොට සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයේ වැඩ කරන වෛද්‍යවරු කාගේ හරි අතපල්ලෙන් වැටලාද? විශේෂයෙන්ම ජනාධිපතිවරු රටේ නැති අවස්ථාවක මේ තීරණ ගන්නේ කවුද? ඒක රජ්‍ය වන්දාරින් සංගමයේ විදියට ඉදිරියේදී නම්ගම් සහිතව මේ මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයේ ඉන්න මේ කුමන්ත්‍රණකාරී නිලධාරීන් කවුද කියලා හෙළිදරව් කරන්න අපි ලෑස්ති. කිසිදු තැනකින් හරි ප්‍රතිචාරයක් නැති තැන අපි තීරණය කළා දිවයිනම ආවරණය වන වැඩවර්ජන ක්‍රියාමාර්ගයක් දිවයිනේ සියලුම රෝහල් ආවරණය වන පරිදි හෙට උදේ 8 සිට ආරම්භ කරන්න. මේ වැඩවර්ජනය හරහා හදිසි රෝග ප්‍රතිකාර කටයුතු සඳහා කිසිදු බාධාවක් ඇති වෙන්නේ නැහැ. සියලුම මාතෘ රෝහල්, සියලුම ළමා රෝහල්, වකුගඩු රෝග විශේෂිත ප්‍රතිකාර ඒකක, ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදා රෝහල්, පිළිකා රෝහල්, මානසික සෞඛ්‍ය විද්‍යායතනය, අංගොඩ ඒ රෝහල් වල හෙට උදෑසන මේ වැඩවර්ජනය ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
Earlier today, issuing a statement in this regard, Director General of Health Services Dr. Asela Gunawardena stated that despite arrangements being made to provide the increased allowance, the government treasury has failed to allocate funds within the approved allocation limit. As such, the statement further added that the debt allowance provided to state-employed doctors will be temporarily suspended as a result. However, in a later development, the indefinite strike action decided by the GMOA and GDSA was called off, following the suspension of the previous circular issued by the Director General of Health Services. Subsequently, the heads of the respective entities have been ordered to pay the relevant allowance through a special voucher to the doctors for the month of January, for those who do not receive the debt allowance through the regular payroll. Parliament took a tense turn today as members of the opposition strongly urged the government to not debate the online safety bill that was tabled in Parliament for its second reading. However, a subsequent vote to decide whether to debate the bill or not in the first place was held, and 83 parliamentarians voted in favour, while 50 voted against, which took the bill into Parliament for debate.
At the party leaders' meeting last Friday, a decision was made to hold parliamentary sessions for this week, today and tomorrow. Further, a decision was made to table the highly controversial online safety bill for its second reading. With security being beefed up near the parliament entrances this morning, public protests were held expressing their objection towards the online safety bill. Prior to the commencement of the parliamentary session for the day, the MPs in the opposition during a meeting requested that the Speaker of Parliament Mahinda Abewardena not debate the online safety bill. However, the session commenced and the Sectoral Oversight Committee report pertaining to the bill was tabled in Parliament.
සභානායකතුමනි මේ වෙලාවේ විපක්ෂයේ සියලුම മന്ത്രിවරු පැමිණිලා මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් පක්ෂ නායක රැස්වීම තියලා විවාදයේ කටයුතු ආරම්භ කරන්න කියලා ඉල්ලීමක් කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අද අධීක්ෂණකාරක සභාවේ වාර්තාව දැන් මොහොතකට කලින් තමයි මෙතන ඉදිරිපත්. ඉතින් ඒකේ මොනවද තියෙනවද කියලා තවමත් මේක දන්නේ නැති නිසා සභාවේ කටයුතු අත්හිටවලා අපි මේ වෙලාවේ පක්ෂ නායක රැස්වීමට රැස්වීම. සභාව කල්තියි.
After an hour, Parliament reconvened and opposition parliamentarians continued to raise their objection in debating the online safety bill.
විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ රට ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී රටක් මේක ඒකාධිපති රටක් නෙවෙයි භාෂණයේ නිදහස බොහොම වැදගත්. තමුන්නාන්සලා දැන් මේ මොහොතේ මේ සංශෝධන දෙන්නේ. මේ සංශෝධන කොයි විදියට ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණ තීන්දුවත් එක්ක ගැලපෙනවද නැද්ද කියලා අපිට අධ්‍යයනය කරන්න වෙලාවක් ඕන. ඒ වෙලාව මෙතන නැහැ. කරුණාකරලා ඒ නිසා මේක වෙන දවසකට කල් දැමීම සඳහා කටයුතු කරන්න කියලා මම ඉල්ලා හිටියා.
දැන් මේ පනතේ මුඛ්‍ය පරමාර්ථ බවට පත් වී තිබෙන්නේ එම සමාජ මාධ්‍ය හලා ගරාගෙන යන තොරතුරු අඩපණ කිරීම.
සමාජ මාධ්‍යයේ සත්‍ය පුවත් යන එක පිළිබඳව අපි සියලු දෙනා එකඟයි. අසත්‍ය පුවත් යන එකට තමයි විරුද්ධ. ඒ නිසා ඇත්ත කියන අය සත්‍ය කියන අය මේකට බය වෙන්න දෙයක් නැහැ.
ඉතින් මේක අලුත් දෙයක් නෑ. සාමාන්‍ය පනතක් සම්බන්ධ කරන ආකාරයේ ක්‍රියාදාමය අනුගමනය කළා තියෙන නිසා මේක අපි ඉදිරියට යමු.
සභාව එකඟද?
අපි විරුද්ධයි මේකට.
ඕකේ.
As a result, a vote was held in Parliament to decide whether to debate the online safety bill or not. During the division, 83 parliamentarians voted in favour of debating the bill, while 50 parliamentarians voted against it.
ටිරාන් අලස් මැතිතුමා ආරම්භ කරන්න.
මේ පනතෙන් අපි ආවරණය කරන්නේ සෝෂල් මීඩියා යූස් කරලා වංචා කිරීම. එතකොට කැරැල්ලක් ඇති වෙන ආකාරයෙන් අසත්‍ය ප්‍රකාශ sannivedanaya කිරීම. ළමා අපචාර, කාන්තා හිංසනය, ආගමික සහජීවනයට බාධා කිරීම. ඉතින් මේ සියලු දේ නවත්තන්න අපිට යම් කිසි නීති රීති අවශ්‍ය බව මං හිතන්නේ අපි සියලු දෙනාම ඒක දන්නවා.
The internet tech industry, the intermediaries, have they approved the amendments that you have proposed?
Of course, we have had extensive discussions with the Asian Coalition where it covers about 15 companies. Our team went to Singapore and sat with them for 3 days, went para by para, and then after that they gave their suggestions.
Have met the approval of those people that you refer to, the Asian, that community has approved these amendments that you have tabled.
Whatever the amendments we are bringing, we have come to an agreement on those. But all what they have suggested has not come in here. And I made it very clear that I will try to accommodate as much as possible, not everything what they give.
මාර්ගගත ක්‍රමවේද සුරක්ෂිත කිරීම අවශ්‍යයි. ඒක ගැටලුවක් නැහැ. නමුත් ඇයි මේක හදිස්සිය කරන්නේ? සාකච්ඡාවක් නැවතිව ඇයි මේක කරන්නේ කියන ප්‍රශ්නය තමයි තියෙන්නේ. ඇයි මේක අපිට සාකච්ඡා කරලා නිසි විදියට කරන්න බැරි?
මේකේ අභිමතාර්ථය ඉතාමත් පැහැදිලි. මේක මැතිවරණ වර්ෂය. රජයට ඕන වෙලා තියෙන්නේ රජයට අවාසිදායක සියලුම අදහස් මර්ධනය කිරීම.
මේ තුලින් වැට බදින්නේ වංචාව කරන පුද්ගලයා.
කිසිම අවස්ථාවක මේ තුලින් පුද්ගලයන් සාදලී ලෙස කරන විවේචනයන් වලට අත තියන්නේවත් නැහැ.
All that we the opposition wanted was that the minister himself appointed an expert committee. After the gazetting, after the challenge in the Supreme Court, after the determination of the Supreme Court, he went and appointed a committee. That committee made some recommendations. Yesterday at the Sectoral Oversight Committee, apparently both the government members and the opposition members agreed that that must be incorporated. So why don't you incorporate that? The Attorney General had said that cannot be done because Article 78(3), there is a bar, it changes the nature of the bill. Then what do you have to do? You have to withdraw the bill, you have to re-gazette it according to the consensus that has been reached by both sides, that the recommendations of the experts must be incorporated, and then have the bill passed without a division. Once the consensus has been reached also at the Sectoral Oversight Committee, the government is bulldozing this defective bill today. There are only 56 clauses in this bill. Supreme Court has suggested that 34 of those be amended, and what is worse, the government has placed amendments that are amending 42 clauses out of 56, and that comes to us just now. When there can be a process by which the entire house on both sides can agree and pass a law that is complete, the government has chosen their wrongful path of bulldozing through. This is the characteristic of this government, that using the false majority that they have, they are bulldozing through oppressive, draconian piece of legislation in this house. Thank you.
In other news, experts of the United Nations, citing several grave concerns, called on the Sri Lankan government to immediately suspend the ongoing Yuktiya police operation. In a statement, the experts said that the current prima facie severe repression against suspected drug offenders is deeply worrying and stressed that rehabilitation must be conducted from a harm reduction perspective. Further, experts urged Sri Lankan authorities to investigate thoroughly and impartially any allegations of torture, ill treatment, denial of due process and fair trial rights, and added that irregularities in the judicial process of assigning offenders to rehabilitation centres should also be investigated. UN experts have expressed alarm at the heavy security-driven approach of Sri Lanka's anti-drug initiative and called on authorities to immediately suspend the ongoing Yuktiya operation and focus on policies based on health and human rights. In a statement issued by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the UN stated that drug users have human rights and added that they deserve to live a life with dignity without facing further discrimination and stigmatization. Experts stated that they deplored the reported cases of arbitrary arrests of thousands of drug offenders from marginalized socio-economic groups and the detention of hundreds at compulsory military-run rehabilitation centers. While adding that torture and ill treatment was also reported during the Yuktiya operation, UN experts are of the view that the current context of severe repression against suspected drug offenders is deeply worrying. They stress that rehabilitation must be conducted from a harm reduction perspective, respecting the autonomy and informed consent of drug users, including the right to refuse medication. While expressing their readiness to provide technical cooperation, the experts said that compulsory rehabilitation centers should be closed immediately and replaced by voluntary, evidence-based, rights-based, and community-based social services. They further urged the Sri Lankan authorities to investigate thoroughly and impartially any allegations of torture, ill treatment and denial of due process and fair trial rights, and added that irregularities in the judicial process of assigning offenders to rehabilitation centers should also be investigated. They called on the government to review its current legislation on drug offences and to end the involvement of armed forces in drug control and treatment activities in line with international human rights law and standards. A group of legislators representing the north of Sri Lanka have sought India's intervention to ensure that Colombo fully implements the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which provides for the devolution of power to the minority community. PTI reported, quoting sources, that the group, led by veteran politician and TNA leader R. Sampanthan, met India's new High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Santosh Jha, yesterday. Sources from the Tamil National Alliance have said that the 2-hour-long talks were centered on the 13th Amendment. The Northeast political representatives have pointed out the need for India's intervention in the current Sri Lankan political context for meaningful devolution of power. Meanwhile, the Indian High Commissioner in Colombo reports that the new Indian High Commissioner met with leaders of the northern and eastern provinces and discussed issues concerning political, economic and social development of the region. The Indian High Commission, in an ex post, said that said reiterating India's long-standing position on reconciliation and full implementation of the 13th Amendment, High Commissioner reaffirmed India's continuous commitment to work for the well-being of the people of this region. The President's senior advisor on national security, Sagar Ratnayaka, says that as the country achieves economic stability, the government continues its focus on accelerating economic growth. Speaking at the Budget 2024 conference organized by the President's Trade Union Relations Division, he stated that all projects proposed in the Budget 2024 are aimed at achieving that economic growth in order to increase the individual income to battle the increased inflation of that past year.
සියට හැත්තෑවකට හැත්ත හතරකට ගියා 2022 එක්තරා අවස්ථාවකදී සැප්තැම්බර් වෙද්දී. ගෞරුද්දේ අගවේද්දී 2023 දෙසැම්බරදී සියට හතරකට අඩු වෙලා මට මතක හැටියට ඔක්තෝබර් වල 1.4කටත් අඩු වුණා. මේකෙන් කියන්නේ දැන් ආර්ථිකය ශක්තිමත් වෙනවා, ස්ථාවර වෙනවා. විශේෂයෙන් රාජ්‍ය ආදායමුත් වැඩි වුණා, බදු බර වැඩි වුණා තමයි. නමුත් රටක සාමාන්‍යයෙන් දලදේශ නිෂ්පාදනයෙන් 16ක පමණ ප්‍රමාණයක් රාජ්‍ය ආදායම් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. තිබ්බේ නැත්නම් ඒ රටේ දැන් මේ වර්ෂයේ 11%කට වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා ගේ වර්ෂයේ අගවේදී. නමුත් මේ ඔක්කොම හොඳම තැනක කියලා මම කියන්නේ. මොකද දැන් එතෙන්ට එන්නේ බදු බර වැඩි වෙලා විනිමය එක්ක සම්බන්ධ බඩු මිල ගේන්න පුළුවන් අඩුම තැනකට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. මොකද රුපියල මීට වඩා ශක්තිමත් වෙන්නේ බොහොම හැමින්. එහෙනම් අපිට කරන්න තියෙන්නේ මොකද්ද? ආදායම වැඩි කරන එක. නැත්නම් මේ 3 ගුණයකින් වැඩි වෙච්ච බඩු මිලට ගැළපෙන ආදායම අපි ඇති කරේ නැත්නම් ආදායම වැඩි වුන්නේ නැහැ. 10000කින් රාජ්‍ය සේවකින්ගේ වැඩි වෙනවා මේ වර්ෂයේ. ඉතින් ඒ වැඩි වෙච්ච බඩු මිලත් එක්ක මේක ගෑවෙන්නවත් බෑ. ඉතින් රාජ්‍යයට මේ අවුරුද්දේ දරා ගන්න පුළුවන් ප්‍රමාණය තමයි මේ දුන්නේ. අමාරුවෙන් හරි ඒ දුන්නා. අපි වේගයෙන් වැඩි කරන්න ඕනේ. ඉතින් දැන් ඉදිරි වැඩසටහන ඔක්කොම තියෙන්නේ ආර්ථික වර්ධන වේගය වැඩි කරගන්න. 2024 අයවැය සම්පූර්ණයෙන් සකස් කරේ මේක ඉලක්ක කරගෙන.
Welcome back. The Colombo Stock Exchange continued into its 11th consecutive spiral down session today, weighed by losses in industrial and financial stocks. The CSE All Share Index closed 0.89% down at 10,279.09 points, while the S&P SL20 closed 0.86% down at 2,901.30 points. The Distilleries Company of Sri Lanka PLC and Expo Lanka Holdings PLC were the top losers on the index, falling 3.4% and 1.5% respectively. Trading volume on the index fell to 29.8 million shares from 54.6 million shares in the previous session. Equity market turnover fell to 700.1 million rupees from 979 million rupees in the previous session. The capital goods sector was the top contributor to market turnover today, while the materials sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign investors were net sellers, offloading stocks worth 178 million rupees, as domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing shares worth 582.4 million rupees. With that, let's take a look at how the rupee exchange rates changed during the course of the day today. Now, in an outstanding achievement, Singer Sri Lanka secured the prestigious Gold Award for the third consecutive year in the service sector category. SLT Digital Services, meanwhile, announced the launch of its innovative school attendance notification system. With that, let's take a look at today's corporate news segment for the day.
Showcasing the company's unwavering commitment, Singer Sri Lanka secured the prestigious Gold Award for the third consecutive year in the service sector category. This outstanding recognition was received by the organization at the South Asian Federation of Accountants Best Presented Annual Report Awards, Integrated Reporting Awards, and SARC Anniversary Awards for Corporate Governance Disclosures Competition 2022. Meanwhile, SLT Digital Services, the emerging digital engagement solutions arm of SLT Mobitel, proudly announced the launch of its innovative school attendance notification system. This initiative highlights the company's primary goal of automating and optimizing the process of monitoring student attendance, ensuring accuracy, efficiency, and specifically the safety of children. Further, this innovative project boosts child safety by providing real-time updates to parents while also providing teachers with easy accessible information about students. In other corporate news, Amana Bank today announced the resignation of an independent director of the company. Accordingly, Aaron Russell Davison was resigned from the position of non-executive independent director effective from 31st of January this year.
That wraps up all the news I have for you for this evening. I'm Jonathan Benedict. Have a blessed Wednesday ahead and a good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.